There's a moment, quiet, maybe even peaceful, when you think the fight is over. You believe the threat has passed, that you've triumphed. Your adversary appears weakened, cornered, finished. Maybe they even apologize. Maybe they walk away. Maybe they disappear. And so, you do the noble thing. You let it go. You show mercy. You allow them to breathe, to survive, to rebuild. But here's the cruel truth: what you think is mercy may be the seed of your own downfall. Because an enemy who's merely wounded is not an enemy who's been destroyed. They're an enemy with a memory. And memory is dangerous. You see, people don't forget humiliation. They don't forget betrayal. They don't forget loss. They may smile. They may even thank you. But deep within them, something lingers. Resentment takes root. Vengeance brews. And one day, quietly, strategically, maybe even politely, they'll come for you. That is why Robert Greene wrote Law 15, crush your enemy totally. It's not about cruelty for cruelty's sake. It's not about bloodlust or ruthlessness in the shallow sense. It's about survival. It's about understanding the nature of power, the psychology of enemies, and the fatal error of leaving loose ends. Let me take you deeper into this, because this is not a law for the faint-hearted. It's a law for those who wish to win, and keep winning. Let's begin with a little story. It's ancient, but the lesson is timeless. Centuries ago, Rome was rising. Carthage, its fierce rival, had already faced Rome in 2 punishing wars. Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, had brought the Roman Republic to its knees more than once. But eventually, Rome prevailed. Carthage was weakened. Broken. Left to tend its wounds. And the Roman Senate had a choice: leave Carthage alone, or eliminate it completely. One senator, Cato the Elder, stood up and ended every speech with the same chilling words, no matter the topic: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. And finally, they did it. In the Third Punic War, the Romans crushed Carthage. They razed the city to the ground, salted the earth, and ensured that no threat would ever rise from it again. Carthage was not just defeated. It was annihilated. Now you might say, that's brutal. That's excessive. But let me ask you this: had they not done it, what might have happened? Another Hannibal? Another war? More Roman lives lost? Rome understood something we often forget in the modern world: in boardrooms, in politics, in personal rivalries, half measures in conflict are often more dangerous than outright failure. Because an enemy who survives is an enemy who learns. An enemy who adapts. And worst of all, an enemy who waits. History is full of such examples. Let's fast forward a bit. Think about Napoleon. He defeats Austria. He defeats Prussia. He defeats Russia. Over and over, he proves his strategic genius. But what does he often do? He lets them live. He makes peace, signs treaties, leaves them breathing. And what do? They regroup. They unite. And eventually, they crush him. The problem isn't just military. It applies to every level of life. To politics. To business. To personal struggles. When you have an opponent, a real opponent, not just someone who disagrees with you, but someone who would see you fall, then hesitation is a liability. Kindness can be a dagger in your own back. Look at Steve Jobs. After he was forced out of Apple, he wandered for years, building Next, helping Pixar. But inside, he was not done. He was biding his time. And when he returned to Apple, he didn't just lead, it was a quiet purge. He cleaned house. No half measures. No alliances with those who doubted him before. And what followed was one of the greatest business resurrections in history. Because he understood, if you want to control the narrative, you cannot leave your enemies a way back in. Now let me pause here, because I know what you're thinking. This sounds harsh. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? Let me make something very clear. This law is not about being heartless. It's about being wise. It's about understanding who your enemy is. Not everyone who opposes you is your enemy. Not every disagreement is a declaration of war. But when you do have an enemy, one who wants your job, your power, your place in the world, mercy, in that context, is not noble. It's naive. If a snake is biting you, do you stop halfway through killing it? Do you say, well, it's mostly crushed now? No. Because the moment you look away, it will strike again. Enemies remember. Always. And the more merciful you are, the more emboldened they become. Let me give you a modern, more personal example. In the corporate world, two executives are fighting for the same promotion. One wins. The other is pushed aside. But instead of letting the loser go, they keep them around. They try to be fair. They try to be kind. And then what happens? Office politics. Whisper campaigns. Sabotage. The next time there's an opening, guess who's maneuvering in the shadows? You gave them a second chance. And they used it to take you down. That's the brutal clarity of power. You cannot leave room for your enemies to grow. Once they've shown you their hand, once they've declared their intent, once they've acted against you, you must eliminate their ability to harm you again. Totally. Now, total doesn't always mean physical destruction. In the modern world, we don't burn cities or exile rivals to islands, at least not literally. But we do disempower. We isolate. We neutralize. And if you're playing a game of power, you'd better know how to do it cleanly, fully, and finally. If someone tried to ruin your reputation, you destroy their credibility. If they tried to block your rise, you cut off their access to influence. If they tried to sabotage your plans, you erase their ability to act. Not halfway. All the way. Now let me be clear. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about getting emotional. This is about strategy. The best power players in history, Machiavelli, Bismarck, Elizabeth I, they didn't act out of rage. They acted with calculation. With finality. They knew, a clean break, even if harsh, is better than a festering wound. And here's the key, when you crush your enemy totally, you send a message. To others. To the world. And that message is, do not test me. Because power, real power, is not just about having authority. It's about maintaining it. And that requires respect. It requires fear. Not terror, but respect for the consequences. When people know that you will not hesitate, they hesitate. Let's not forget another powerful truth: the longer you let an enemy linger, the more sympathy they gather. Look at politics. The defeated candidate becomes the underdog. The wronged executive becomes the martyr. Public opinion shifts. Suddenly, you look like the villain. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't finish the job. People are emotional. They root for comebacks. They love a redemption arc. But you? You're not writing fiction. You're playing the game of power. And in this game, redemption for your enemies often comes at your expense. So how do you apply this? You do it with precision. First, you identify your real enemies. Not just the loud ones. Often, your greatest threat is silent. Smiling. Friendly even. But watch their actions. Watch who they align with. Watch what they block. Watch how they maneuver. The enemy reveals themselves not in words, but in patterns. Second, you plan your attack. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. strategically. You think long-term. You don't just defeat them in the moment, you eliminate their influence, their alliances, their future leverage. Third, you act decisively. No hesitation. No second chances. No lingering threats. Because if they rise again, it's not their fault, it's yours. Now, let's bring it full circle. This law is not for everyday interactions. It's not for arguments with friends or petty disagreements. It's for real power plays. For moments when your future, your influence, your standing is on the line. In those moments, half measures are fatal. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he knew there was no going back. When Alexander cut the Gordian knot, he understood complexity doesn't always require delicacy. Sometimes it requires boldness, finality, totality. So if you're going to fight, finish it. Don't linger. Don't hesitate. Don't hope they forget. They won't. Crush your enemy. Not partly. Not politely. Totally. And then, move on. Not with guilt, but with clarity. Because you didn't do it out of cruelty. You did it to protect your vision, your mission, your destiny. And in the end, that's what power is about, not domination, but direction. Not oppression, but order. Not fear, but respect. And that, my friend, is why you crush your enemy totally.